Well, peace be with you.
And also with you.
On this beautiful day. I have to tell you, one summer, a number of years ago, I made a very foolish mistake of mentioning to my friend Tom that I like to go canoeing. Tom immediately set up a trip for 6 people in 3 different canoes, and the first canoe would be Tom and his friend, the second canoe would be Bob and Gordon, the third would be Lisa and myself. And it was a lovely day. It was calm, it was peaceful. As we drove up from Massachusetts to some river in Vermont I had never heard of before, I sat next to Bob in the back seat, and I felt bad for him because he had some difficulty getting into the car. He seemed to be old and frail, and I decided to put his mind at ease because I was a little bit proud of my canoeing skills. After all, I'd gone on some multi-day trips up in Maine, and I had handled some whitewater, some rapids. So I asked Bob, "Have you canoed much?" Bob turned to me and said, "Well, yes," said Bob. "In fact, I used to design racing canoes." And I said, "Well, Bob, do you race canoes yourself?" And Bob said, "Well, not anymore, but I was the USA National Canoe Slalom Champion for 3 years in a row." And then Bob now turned to me in concern and said, "Eric, do you know about haystacks and hydraulics?" And I said, "What's a haystack?" He said, "Well, a haystack," he explained patiently, "the river is so fierce it forms a standing wave. And as you go by it," he said, "don't steer your, even though the water is above you, don't steer it in there." And I said, "Well, why not?" Stupid question. He says, "Because it could be sucked into a hydraulic." And I said, "What's a hydraulic?" And he said, "That's an inverted haystack that's like a cyclone that'll suck you down to the bottom of the river, and if you're unfortunate enough, it can pin you there until you run out of air." And at that point, we arrived at the river, no more time for fun conversations with Bob. So Psalm 46 also starts out as a lovely day, the one that Fiona just read for us here. Verse 1 says, "God is our refuge and strength. All is very peaceful and calm, a present help in trouble. You don't have to worry about anything." That's God is our refuge and strength. That sounds very peaceful to me, right? Secure, strong, no disturbances on a lovely day. But then the verses that Fiona read go ahead on 2 and 3. "Therefore we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake into the heart of the sea, though the waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult." And suddenly, Psalm 46 is not very calm and peaceful anymore. We're talking about churning whitewater, eating up the land, just like I didn't know I was about to discover on my little peaceful canoe trip. Well, we got out of our cars up in Vermont, and I heard this thundering noise, and I looked up, and the sky was perfectly blue. Where could the thundering noise be coming from? And I discovered there were 40 or 50 other cars in this meadow also. And I decided to play it safe that day, so I had a straw hat. Sunburns really bad for the skin. But the other people stepping out of their cars were dressed in these designer wetsuits, and they started to put on crash helmets. And then Bob, the USA National Canoe Slalom Champion for 3 years in a row, went to the trunk and took out his crash helmet and put it on. I had a straw hat. And I started to point this out to Tom. So don't worry, it's just a canoe trip. What could happen? You'll be fine. You'll be fine. So we walked down to the river. I don't know about you, when I walk to a river, usually it's like you're where the water hits the land, that's where it hits. But this river was a wall 4 feet up. It's a wall going past you. So it's like you're walking on land and you run into a white wall. I put my hand in it. It was just white water going past 4 feet above the ground. And I said, what do we do now? And Tom said, just watch, no problem. So Tom and his friend, they picked up their canoe on their shoulders, they charged the river, threw the canoe, and just jumped after it. And I'm like, and then Bob, they all have crash helmets. And then Bob and Gordon pick up their canoe, they jump into the river. And I said, well, okay, let's go. So we picked up our canoe, we ran to the river, and we disappeared also onto the river. And it's a wild river. It was pretty wild. And so Psalm 46 also depicts a churning white water, not just about water, but it talks about what's happening in our world. Verse 6 says, the nations are in an uproar. All this water image of Psalm 46 is talking about the churning, the white water, the changing landscapes in our world, But throughout all this turbulence, Psalm 46 holds strong, says rely on God. God is on our side. This is a fortress. God is a city, a refuge that will not be moved by any uproar, by any storm. It's secure. God is our refuge and strength. Well, I didn't sense that security of God from Psalm 46 as we tossed and pitched on this raging river. I was in the back, and I steered us around the haystacks. I didn't hit the haystacks. I was really proud of myself. And then Lisa's looking out the front. She was pointing out where the hydraulics were, the inverted cyclones in the river, and we avoided those, and we're steering back and forth, and we're feeling pretty good, We're handling this, what I found later was like a class 3, class 4 whitewater river. And we're going along, and then our communication broke out. I distinctly remember yelling, go left. She remembers, go right. When you do that, the canoe is no longer going down. Now you're going broadside down a river, right at the largest rock we have ever seen in that river. And we hit the rock perfectly in the middle. And then in slow motion, the canoe went up on the rock. We both fell out of the canoe, holding our paddles that we had tied to the canoe, because after all, on a peaceful day when you're just relaxing on the river, you don't want to lose your paddle. And so there we are. The water is, we're on the side of the rock. It's like white water. We're just barely holding on to the canoe here, but it's balanced perfectly. And we walk, we coordinate step by step. We get up onto the rock, and there we are on a rock maybe 5-6 feet across, an upside down canoe, and the two of us in the middle of the wild river. And I looked around. There's powerful surging water all around. What do we do now? And at that moment, fortunately, a kayaker comes along. She pulls over to the bank. She sees our predicament. She yells out, "I'm an expert kayaker. I will come to you and help you." And so she gets in the water, but she's swept one way and she can't get to the rock because it's pretty fierce water. She goes to the side again. "I'll try again." She tries again, doesn't get to us. The third time, and then she says, "I can't get to you. Good luck." And she leaves us. Psalm 46 says in verse 10, "Be still and know that I am God." And we were certainly still on that rock. We couldn't go anywhere. We had a lot of time to be still. So Psalm 46 was a very important scripture in the Reformation, the handling the corruption, trying to fix the church back in the 1500s. And the theologian Martin Luther turned again and again to such scriptures like Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength. You know, not princes, not the bishops even that were becoming corrupt at the time. And we need to get people out of the way. We need to have the Bible in language that we can understand, because it's not it's God. God is our refuge and strength. And other people are, to the extent that they model this amazing love of God that comes to us first. So Luther was saying sometimes we need to just be still and let God be God. God's grace for us, God's love for us means that we can even walk into the raging waters of life and be still. And God is our refuge and strength. We can wade into those waters. We're going to have the choir sing a song, "Wade in the Waters." Just like the people of Israel waded into the waters, and then they saw the army of the king of Egypt coming after them, because God said, "Be still, be still." And God took care of the army of Egypt. So in our enforced stillness, I walked around a little rock, and I saw where we hit the rock. You know, it's just like fierce water. If we put the canoe in, it would have been either way. To the side of the rock would have been swept away. And so I looked at the back of the rock. And the back of the rock, I could walk down the rock, and like on each side, a wall of white water would come up. And I came to where one side of the river slammed into the other side. But I could like walk right here where it's coming into the V like this. And I was just still in that moment. And I realized God is telling me to go to the raging water where it comes together. And that's how I can get out. And so I communicated my plan to Lisa, and we get the canoe, because the canoe could have been swept away any other place. This was two equal opposing forces. We had the canoe, and I held on with all my might and put it on top of where the two walls of water came together, and it held. It was like bucking back and forth. And at a signal, she jumped on my back, my shoulder. She jumped onto the canoe. I jumped onto the canoe. We went away, and the rest of the day was wonderful. We never hit another hydraulic. We never hit another rock. We communicated really, really well after that, and it was just a beautiful day. And I later learned that we had traveled to a place that's actually called the Wild River, and it was a scheduled release of the dam. So that's, in other words, it's extreme fun for the pros with their crash helmets. And then on one stretch, I watched Bob and Gordon navigate some of the white water out there. And you have to understand, Gordon, so Bob's in the back of the canoe, the three-time USA National Canoe Slalom champion. In the front of the canoe is Gordon. He's never canoed in his life. And I watched them handle this incredibly rough whitewater car, and that's when the beautiful people in their stretch suits, and they were wiping out canoes, were paddling along, they were going into the river, and there's Gordon on the canoe. He's never canoed in his life, and he's in the front, and he kind of dips his paddle in, he shifts his seat, looks around, he's having a great time, he's just kind of going along. Why is he so calm? Because he has Bob in his canoe. Watching Bob was like watching a master at work. He'd do a deft touch here, another touch to the other side, and Bob, to see Bob handle this, you thought, here's the master. He's just touching it, and there's a slicing through the water. People are wiping out to the left and right of them. And because you don't have to worry when you have someone like Bob in your canoe. And when we face the turbulent waters of life, who do we want in our canoe? I want God. I want Jesus in my canoe. Wouldn't that be great if Jesus was in our canoe in life? Wouldn't you want to have Jesus back there? That would be incredible. When things go wrong, when we get bad news, when it seems like our life is being turned upside down, wouldn't it be great to have him in our canoe? I heard about a girls' basketball team in Oklahoma City, and the world was just blown apart this past February. For the first time in the history of their school, the Academy girls high school basketball team, they won the district championships. They had never done this before. They were so ecstatic. It was a three-pointer at the buzzer. They won by 1 point. They were so incredibly happy, Gave them a victory over the Apaches, 44-43. They were the champions, and they were out, and the family celebrated with them, and they're partying with their friends. They were finally the champions. But their coach went home that night. Coach King was his name, actually, and he was wrestling with whether the team had actually won the first championship. You see, because at the start of the fourth quarter, there was a discrepancy about the score, and the scorekeepers for the teams and the officials were off, and the time clock said that they were down by 4 points at the start of the fourth quarter, but the team officials said it was only down by 2 points, and the referees conferred and they said, well, we always go by what the home officials say. And the coach just went home that night, I said, and he's watching the video and he's tallying every point and every three-pointer. And at 1 a.m., he realizes they didn't win the championship. Or they shouldn't have won the championship. They actually lost by 1 point. And according to the rules, you cannot change the score of a game after it's reported. It's too late. But he knew he had to talk to the team co-captains, Sydney and Cora, the next day and tell them what had happened. And they were heartbroken, but all three of them knew what they had to do, and they had to give up their victory. So right away, the coach got in the car, drove an hour and a half to the other school when they had a practice, came out, gave them the trophy, and they celebrated. And he apologized. And his team was no longer had their first championship. If Jesus is in your canoe, you have a coach you can count on. You can do the right thing, even when it smashes your world apart. You are led by integrity, not by beating your opponent at any cost. And my heart, I am so thankful and proud of that coach and that girls' team, the academy team. Because if Jesus is in your canoe, you have been taught by your teachers, your coaches, your Sunday school role models, mentors, faithful grandmas, fathers with strong faith that can withstand storms, that loving your neighbors is far more important than winning. Because if Jesus is in your canoe, we have a real refuge with God, who walks with us in ways of compassion and caring, not over the other person, but caring for the other person. We have a real strength and a God who walks with us in the ways that brings justice to our neighbors. If Jesus is in our canoe, we will not fear no matter what hits us in life. Even when we wade into the waters, we will not fear. Thanks be to God. I know Jesus is in our canoe. Thanks be to God.